Warriors, today we have a very exciting video that we're creating for all of you out there. We have our wonderful colleagues and collaborators. We have Jan Edwards, Paving the Way Foundation, and Rick Lane, Iggy Ventures. Now, why we're here today, we want to explain to you 3 pending bills that will protect children, internet safety, online safety, that all of you out there need to know about. And we're also going to tell you how you can participate, because remember, Warriors, we cannot do this alone. We need all of you. So let's start with some introductions. Jan, would you please lead the way? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what's going on with Paving the Way.
Absolutely. So welcome. Hello. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Jan Edwards, and I am the president of Paving the Way Foundation. And who we are is a fierce disruption in the cycle of child trafficking and exploitation. And we do that through educational programs specifically for young people and their parents. We've educated over 19,000 young people and families across the country in the past 5 years. And we use our award-winning film called Trapped in the Trade that shows the intentional grooming and recruitment of children by children, which always takes people by surprise. And since the pandemic, we've really been focused on now online exploitation too, as most people know, is skyrocketed. Over the past 3 years, we've gone from 16 million online reports to 29 million last year. So this is a pandemic inside a pandemic, as our friend Tammy Tony Butler would say. And we're out to disrupt it. And one of the ways to do that is to educate our kids. Our kids have to be empowered to know what's happening. They're the target, and we're the ones to help provide that information so they can say no, block, delete, report. Thanks for having me on today,
Of
Lynn.
course. Excellent, Jan. It's two-pronged, all of this work. It is the education on the ground. Again, like you mentioned, Jan, parents and children. Yes. So we can have these family partnerships. Let's bring in Rick Lane. I call you our tech guru. You are, founder and CEO of Iggy Ventures, and you're going to tell us a little bit about yourself and what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, thanks again, Lynn, for having me. Your work on all this is incredible. So thank you for taking the time and effort. It's a uphill battle, but I know one that we can win over time. My name is Rick Lane. As Lynn said, I'm CEO of Iggy Ventures. But for this video, I volunteer my time for child safety groups across the country on tech policy related issues. I use the 30 years of Capitol Hill experience on tech policy to know sort of the history where a lot of these bills have come from, where they're heading. I was a point person at News Corp when we bought MySpace, so I know social networking very well. I'm also a technologist, so I understand the technology behind it.
Excellent. I want to start with, and please, both of you, just jump in. We're all friends here. Rick, we have 3 bills right now. KOSA, Kids Online Safety Act, COPPA, Children and Teens Privacy Protection Act, and the Earn It Act. What would you like to say? Start. Give us an explanation so our warriors, our viewers, can understand how these 3 different bills will protect. And we need to work in unison with these 3 different bills as a package. Go.
Yes, so all 3 actually work together to create a fabric of child protection. I think that's important to note. They're not competing bills. They don't cancel each other out. One's not more important than the other. They're all very important, and they all need to be enacted by Congress.
And bipartisan. I don't mean to interrupt.
And bipartisan, very important that they're all very bipartisan. And I think Jan's going to talk more about the Earn It Act, so I'll kind of focus on KOSA and COPPA. But the COPPA bill is COPPA 2.0 that was passed by the Senate Commerce Committee recently by an overwhelming vote, bipartisan vote, as Lynn was saying. Basically is an update to the 1998 Child's Online Privacy Protection Act that was originally drafted by, at the time, Congressman Ed Markey from Massachusetts. And it was the first time that legislation was passed whose goal was to protect the collection and use of information of children under the age of 13, so it's 12 and under. and how websites can collect, use permissions that parents must give for the collection and use of that information, and the penalties that the Federal Trade Commission can apply if those websites are violating the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. Senator Markey wanted to ensure that the age of 12 and under should be higher. He always wanted it to be 17 and under. But for a compromise back in, again, that time, it was 12 and under. What COPPA 2.0 does is raises the age to under 17. I think it should be 17 and under, but right now, again, compromises, it's 16 and under, and creates greater protections for that group. So 13 to 16-year-olds will have greater privacy protections under the legislation. It also allows for the ability of parents to better control information of kids who are younger. It has more enforcement authority as part of the legislation. And it also provides greater guidance for businesses on how to ensure that they're protecting the information of children and teens who are 16 and under. CASA, on the other hand, is legislation on the devices and the sites themselves. So think of it where one is about the collection and use, the other is child protection built into the systems themselves, the devices and the websites. So child protection by design, child privacy by design. So it creates basically rules of the road to ensure that there is a duty of care of type of litigation, that people can go after websites that are knowingly creating by the design of their products harm to children. And so you have the collection and use of information, and then you have design protections in this child safety by design of CASA, and then you have the Earn It Act, and I'll let Jan talk a little bit about that.
Oh, no, I think you should keep on going with the bills, because okay. I have some, actually I'm going to say something before you talk about the Earn It Act.
Sure.
A lot of people wonder, so why are we even having this conversation?
Yes.
Like, really?
Exactly.
Like, how has this gotten so out of hand that we now have to have legislation, which is really what the Earn It Act addresses? And I'm going to leave your viewers/listeners with 3 statistics that are alarming that will give you a sense of why this is so important. So there's 3 numbers, 10, 17, and 29. All right. So right now, according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where all of the missing kids and all of the online child sexual abuse material reports go to, right? So they are the go-to hub with the data. The average age of children that are being recruited is 10 to 13. That's 5th grade. And when I was out working with some 5th graders earlier this year, and I asked them, they all had devices, they all had tablets, because when we shut down our schools, our school sent our kids home with tablets, which is great. We now gave our children access to education. We also gave the world access to our children. When I asked them, how many of you have either received or been asked for an inappropriate picture, every single hand went up. These are 10-year-olds. They're getting pictures of body parts that some of them probably don't even know what it is, right? That's the first number I want you to get and have it seared into your brain as to why this is so important. Second thing, 17. Nick Mick did a study recently, and it takes less than 17 minutes for a child to send an inappropriate picture to a stranger. So in the time that you order your DoorDash or your Uber Eats, 2 kids can be exploited. It's frightening how quickly this happens. Our kids have been the most impacted by this pandemic inside the pandemic, and this is the result of it. And the last number, which I shared earlier, is 29 million. Last year, Nick Mick had 29 million reports of child sexual abuse material. Mm-hmm. And I want everybody to be really clear. We're not talking bathing suit pictures and just nudes. We're talking full-blown abuse, self-abuse, child-on-child abuse. And big tech knows about this. We've got several of our friends in this fight, including NCOSE, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, that are going after these large tech companies, because tech companies have intentionally not taken down child sexual abuse material and left it up and generated revenue. And right now, Twitter's in a very big lawsuit, and I'm praying to God they win. Now, because Rick's going to explain this way better than I could. The reason why the Earn It Act is so important is it holds these companies accountable. Our children are being abused. I just got off a phone call with an adolescent physician. I had no idea there was such a thing. There's only 500 of them in the country. And we talked about the developmental delays and issues our teenagers are having right now with their brain because of everything that's going on. And our predators know this, they're taking advantage of it. And the technology companies that host this material could just as easily delete it and, quite frankly, report it. And that's what the Earn It Act really paves the way, pardon the pun, into. So Rick, I'm going to pass it right off to you.
And putting revenue, because that's what I tell everybody. The bottom line is, I'm sorry to be so crass, as I tell people every day, it's the kids are the currency. It is revenue, right?
100%.
Jan, I have a question. Adolescent physician, that's different from a pediatrician?
Yes, they focus
because I am ashamed to say I don't really know about this.
I didn't either.
I know about pediatricians, but not what is
adolescent
specialized field. Yeah. I'll have to look into this. What
it is. It's they really work from 12, 13 up to 18.
And so with our youth mental health crisis that I'm constantly talking about, nobody's really talking about that, fueled by the internet, but that's another program, everybody.
Right. Well, and she actually worked in New York. She did her residency at Mount Sinai.
Really?
And that's really where the field that she wanted to focus on is adolescent medicine.
Excellent.
And to me, it is separate and distinct because your brain's developed enough. That's why when we go in and educate kids, our sweet spot's middle school, because their brain's developed enough to comprehend a complex conversation and concept of exploitation and human trafficking, right? They've learned about it somewhere in their history, but they still, their hearts, they still care. They've got this empathy for humanity and other people, right? So they really can affect change moving forward. And it's the same thing in medicine, right? Their brains aren't fully developed. They're fully driven by the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex. The decision-making part of your brain isn't fully developed till you're 25 to 30, right? So the kids should know better. They don't. They honest to God don't. There's not one teenager I've spoken to in the past 3 years that has not willingly sent an inappropriate picture to someone and had no idea the long-term impact of it.
But you know what? I talk to a lot of kids here. I'm in New York and I work a lot in New Jersey and Connecticut also. And they say to me, somebody actually said to me one day, it's like trading in your day, they said to me, baseball cards. It's that normalized. And I'm so afraid of this, the habituation, this normalization. They think nothing of it. I've actually seen what I would call middle school kids here in New York, like walking down the street, they walk in packs and groups and yelling and making their noise, but they all have a phone. They're all on the phone. And I actually saw this group of girls with a couple of guys. The guys ran ahead and the girls were pulling their tops up and their pants down, taking pictures of each other and shouting to the boys, "We're sending it to you now." I'm talking about in the middle of Columbus Circle. I mean, I'm not talking on a side street. No. So they're just, I don't blame the kids. They're growing up in this fishbowl, this normalization. And we're going to talk more about that with you. Now, Rick, I have a question before we continue with Earn It. COPPA, Children and Teens, I should say, Online Privacy Protection Act. You said the age is 16. Why not just make it 17? Is there an answer for that? It's like one more year. What's the holdup,
it's
or we don't know really.
Yeah, it's one of those questions I ask because I do say it should be 17 and under, and it's one of those, because not a good reason. I just don't know why. It's sort of the compromise position where everyone feels is the sweet spot to have the cutoff. But I don't have a good answer. I can't logically. A lot of times in these debates, you can say, well, there's a great perspective of reason why. And this one, I don't get it, especially since for all other type of legal documents and everything else is 18 and older. And so I don't know. I'm sorry, I just don't.
There
I
you
don't.
go.
I just don't know.
No, because it's like one of those things that we just don't know. Like if you have to be legal at 18 for everything else, why not? Okay, we'll leave that for a minute. Now tell us, Rick, about Earn It. Fill us in about that.
Yeah, so Earn It is an amendment to Section 230, and it does other things as well. One of the important things it does is it creates a commission to look at best practices. So it'll bring a variety of experts from business, child safety groups, other places to figure out what are the best practices that websites and apps and online entities can do to help better protect kids from and help on the CSAM issue. The other thing that it does is it takes away the term child pornography and now uses children's sexually explicit materials, CSAM, as part of throughout federal law. So it's just not child pornography any longer, because some folks strongly believe that didn't make it seem as bad as it really is. Some people think it should just be called child rape, which I agree with. But CSAM is the acronym that everyone is
a compromise.
The compromise, right?
Yeah, it should be called child rape. It's illegal. It's a crime, and that's what it is. Let's call it what it is, right?
Yep.
Okay.
That would be my view on
Me
it.
too.
But again, you're trying to get legislation through.
Well, Rick, I'm gonna come back on that. If you really look, because I spend most of my time spent with teenagers, right? They really have no concept. They really don't. And it's everybody else is doing it, right, which makes it okay. And if you look at the media over time, when most of us were growing up, you barely saw kissing and holding hands on TV, and snuggling on the couch, let alone full-blown almost sex on regular television, right? So there's become this normalization over time of what sex is, and it's an animalistic act versus something else, right? Everybody can put their own spin on that, but it's a self-pleasuring, animalistic, I'm going to do this because it feels good kind of thing, versus having any idea of the long-term consequences for women in particular, and short-term consequences for men, right? And I think that when you call it what it is, which is child rape, no child chooses, and I'm really talking about full-blown choice, chooses to be raped or have sex at that age. They don't even know what it is. Right. You talk to any survivor, they're like, I thought this was normal. I didn't know. Right. And I've even got caught, because I work with a lot of college interns. We go through 6 to 7 interns every semester. And I have a couple of them that have had some of their friends end up pregnant. And I look at them jokingly. I'm like, well, they know how this works, right? And one of them looked at me and she goes, no, she didn't.
That's a problem. They don't understand.
Okay, she's 20 years old, got pregnant, and didn't understand how she got pregnant. Again, whole other conversation about that. However, but that's the implication of what's happening to our children in this environment, them having no really full comprehension of the long-term impact. And every survivor that I know, the 3 of us have spoken to, that have unwillingly had that material uploaded onto platforms that they didn't agree with, they've been mortified, and many of them taking their own life or attempted to take their own life. That's the impact of this, because people that look on your social media, they look, future employers look, future clients look on your social media, colleges, local jobs, they look on your social media to see, are you a good match for my place of employment? So there's implications that our kids aren't even thinking about, nor would they even know to think about them. And given your brain's not developed till 25, 16 is a compromise, but come on.
And that's why everybody, parents, grandparents, caregivers, need to step up and form these at-home partnerships.
Yeah, for sure.
It has to be every family member in on it and knowing what's going on, because most of the
100%.
parents and grandparents, I actually have a lot of grandparents that say, I'm talking to my daughter or son and they won't stop my grandchild from doing this, and they write to me or they even call me, and I'm not understanding. And Rick, we're gonna get to you about Earn It, but while this is on my mind, I'm not really understanding. There is a lot of information out there, right? Like, let's leverage this internet for good, because it's not going away. We live in a digital world. Why people cannot understand that, giving your child, there was a new report recently, 85% of parents, 85, let me get this straight, 68% of parents have no clue what their kids are doing 9 to 17 at all, like online. Okay. 1 in 4 are approached online, and the child believes it's an adult. Okay. And then it's like 85% aren't caring or something. It's astounding to me that there is a lot of information that, I know it's dark, I know it's overwhelming, but these are our precious children. Why is everybody really kind of turning a back on this? Because every day in the middle of New York, people will look at me and say, I didn't know that. I didn't hear about that. What do you mean this is going on? Right? So what we've got to, maybe we'll save that for a little bit later on. But I'm not understanding why they're not taking action, more action. You're out there, Jan, educating,
Right. There's a couple of things, because, we do these monthly parent tech talks, right? Because my goal is to educate as many people as possible. And you just never know what's going to be said by whom, that it's going to connect with someone. They're going to go, oh my gosh, right? Is a lot of our parents are overwhelmed with what's happening. And if you look in the past, I'm just going to say 3 years, because we're heading into 2023, right? The beginning of all of this. The past 3 years have been chaotic for the entire planet. You have this new thing that's coming out and killing people, and how it's being managed is there's all kinds of conversations around that. And then there's the, do you mask, do you not mask? Do you vax, do you not vax? Do you go to school, do you not go to school? Up is down is up, lots of chaos. And you've got the inflation and gas prices. And so our parents are doing everything they can just to keep an even keel,
yes,
and put food on the table and keep the lights on. And so this is like one more thing they have to think about. And it's really uncomfortable. They like, you can, they
right.
get all itchy, they get all uncomfortable. And somebody said something the other day that I thought was so powerful. It's like, it's time for you to get your brave on, parents, and be uncomfortable, because your children's lives are at stake. And I would much rather you call me with an uncomfortable question than call me or post that your children's harmed themselves, or they've killed themselves, or they're missing, right? Any of those, you're going to look back and go, I should have been uncomfortable. Right. So it's time for us to get our brave on. It's time for us to be courageous. There's so many resources out there. Lynn, your newsletter is brilliant.
Thank you.
Just chocked full of great information. We have a parent toolkit on our website. We have a safety guide on our website. We have so much information, and that's just the two of us, right? You've got ECPAT and NCOSE, and ECPAT, you've got NCOSE, the National Center for Sexual Exploitation. You've got the National Center for Missing Exploitation. You've got RAIN, with the
rape and incest.
Yeah. Rape and incest, right? You've got so much information out there. Just pick one, download something, and start the conversation with your kids. It might be weird, and go say, this is a weird conversation for me to have, but I got to have it with you.
Well, if we don't have it, we know that the predators are having it,
100%.
And we know that you can teach your child to do everything correctly, but their friend will show them something. So I'd rather the information comes from us.
Absolutely.
And again, if this is all being normalized and they're exchanging nude images like baseball cards, like, let's just talk about it, like age appropriate.
Right. Yes.
Let's just, especially when 90%, now we always know figures are higher. This is what's reported, of teens own iPhones.
Mm-hmm.
So like, we have to talk about it, right? We're giving them devices. I'm sure most parents are paying for it and paying for the internet, right? And I always say, opening your front door and welcoming in the world a bunch of strangers, and you would never do that. So why? And then they just stare at me. They're like, oh, and then they kind of understand it. So you two are doing a fantastic job. Now, Rick, I want to get into Earn It. Fill us in about Earn It.
So the last component piece of the legislation hits on some of the issues that you're just talking about, which is the responsibility of the websites themselves to ensure that CSAM is not proliferating on their sites. and steps that they can take to help stop it. And that's where sort of the rubber meets the road with the opposition, is that they right now, because of the Section 230 protections, the CDA, Communications Decency Act's 230 protections, they do not have to proactively look for harmful materials or illegal materials on their sites, except for copyrighted works, which is another conversation. But besides copyrighted works, they don't have to proactively look. And this legislation would make them take greater steps. Because right now, if there is a case, and there's some cases moving through the courts right now, but they can hide behind 230 and say, we are not the posters. If this is child CSAM, this is CSAM, go after the uploaders. You can't come after us because we have Section 230.
Yeah, they're saying they're billboards. They're kind of like a billboard, and it's just
not a billboard.
You know.
They're saying that because of the liability protections, that they're more like a newsstand. So those of us are old enough remember newsstand.
Newsstand. Okay, I like that.
Over. So they're more like a newsstand. So they're saying, hey, we're not responsible for what's behind us. That is, information, CSAM. But that newsstand would be responsible if they knew that the magazine behind them was all child pornography or sexually explicit materials of children, right? And if I know it's there and I'm selling it, I'm making money off of it,
right?
Yeah, you could be held responsible for that. But the way Section 230 has been interpreted, if they know that it's happening behind them or on their server, they are not currently held responsible. And this legislation would help provide the tools, the legal tools, the litigation tools, the civil litigation tools to go after the websites. Because what happens now is, if my child's pictures are on a website and I ask them to take it down, and this is happening, and they say no, I have no recourse. I can't sue them. I mean, I could try to sue them, but what happens is I want to say that they're not doing enough, and I can't even get to discovery because I'm blocked by Section 230. And the court and the judge says, no, you can't even get to discovery because they have these Section 230 protections. So what the Earn It Act does is says, well, no, if there is evidence that they are helping to facilitate this illegal activity, then yeah, you can look in. And maybe they don't know. Maybe they've done everything that is reasonably possible to help stop this from happening. And then you won't win your case because the judge will say, no, they've taken appropriate steps to try to do this. Or if you have a situation where there's emails saying, we know this is happening, but we don't care. Or in the case of Reddit, where we have subreddits that are fully engaged in CSAM activities, but we have volunteer moderators who are supposed to let us know when these illegal activities are happening on their subreddits. And then when you point it out to them, they say, oh, well, those are volunteer moderators. They're not employees of Reddit. They're doing their own thing. They're not really connected to us. And in fact, one of the defense lawyers for Reddit in the case 2 weeks ago just said that they're not employees. They have really no responsibility, but we call them moderators. I mean, it's like, well, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, as Reddit, we have self-moderators to help stop all this from happening. And then when you say, oh, they're not doing it because the moderators themselves are engaged in uploading these sexually explicit materials, as well as their friends in the subreddits, and like, oh, well, that's, they're not part of us. We have no oversight over them. And right now the courts are leaning like, yeah, that may be the case because of Section 230. The Earn It Act would change that dramatically. They would have a responsibility. It is estimated, I forgot what the number is, but I think it was somewhere in the billions, how much money over the course since Reddit has started that they have saved because they use volunteer moderators versus hiring moderators that would connect them directly to Reddit as Reddit employees. So it's a money issue. I mean, there's hard numbers out there because some of the moderators are complaining that we're doing all this work for free, and then Reddit's getting away from, not having to pay us. So we're doing their work. So it's a whole nother conversation on Reddit. Should moderators be paid or not? But there are economic studies that show how much money Reddit is saving. And also now they can say, because of the way Section 230 is, we can go up to the Hill and say, look, we have moderators to, these volunteer moderators to take care of these issues. We don't need legislation. And then go to the courthouse and say, oh, they're only volunteer moderators. We can't be held responsible for what they do or don't do.
Sounds like flim flam artists to me, but that's
well, their ICO's coming out. They're going to be very wealthy flim flam artists.
Wealthy flim flammers. So. Let me ask you something, Rick. Okay, Section 230. When was that developed? 96-ish?
96. It was part of the 96 Telecommunications Act.
Okay, so we have evolved so much since then. How come, as we update along the way, other bills in Congress and all that, how come there's never been updates or I've seen some challenges and things like that and things brought up. How come we haven't updated this?
Well, we did with FOSTA SESTA. FOSTA SESTA was the first successful update to Section 230. When I started that process, I had just recently left Fox to help and volunteer my time with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and others, and NCOSI and groups I had worked with during my MySpace days. All my friends said, you're never going to win. I mean, they just thought I was crazy. It's a waste of time. There's no way you can beat Silicon Valley. They're too powerful. They have too many friends and they're too well liked. Well, I saw something very different. I saw a vulnerability because of actions they took on other legislation that undermined their credibility. They may have won that battle, but they began to lose the war. And people began seeing their hypocrisy for what it was. And I also knew that I had amazing groups of individuals like yourselves and NCOSI and others across the country who strongly supported an effort to change Section 230 with FOSTA SESTA. We had two members, one in the House and one in the Senate, that were going to the mat for us every single day. We also had an amazing documentary, Mary Mazzio's I Am Jane Doe. And I highly recommend to watch it because the end of her documentary shows that Congress hasn't done anything. And I would love for her to update it to show that we did these amazing things and got legislation passed. It's around the Backpage.com issue. And that movie in of itself generated a real understanding of what the issues were. It was powerful and it allowed us to highlight and got members energized and others energized about what was needed to be done. But that was, some people think that was an anomaly. There are groups right now currently trying to undermine the success of FOSTA SESTA by saying it didn't work, it's putting sex workers at risk. All these websites that have moved overseas, so it didn't have the impact that the supporters thought it would be because it hasn't slowed it down. And they're using that against the Earn It Act, because again, there's groups out there who feel that FOSTA SESTA was a failure. But I laugh because they point to a GAO report that actually shows, it's so interesting. I read the GAO report, it's Government Accounting Office report on FOSTA SESTA. I was like, oh my God, this is great. It shows that we were right. And the other side was able to spin it to show that it was negative. And one of the things that it says is that all these websites moved overseas, so it had no impact, right? So that's one argument that the same, which we knew was going to happen. We fought because there was Silicon Valley tried to export Section 230 in the US, Mexico, Canadian trade agreement. And we were trying to get it carved out. We were trying to say no, that Section 230 should not be part of that trade agreement. We didn't win that battle, but we did get a provision that carved out FOSTA SESTA because we knew it was going to go overseas. So they're saying it had no impact to move overseas, but yet they're saying that all these sex workers are now more at risk because there's no more Backpage. Well, how are they at risk if it hasn't had an impact because everything moved overseas? You can't have it both ways, right? They're contradicting because baloney of what they're saying.
But when
And
you ask
so
those questions, they just don't answer.
they
When
don't,
I've
I
asked
mean,
people here in New York, there's never an answer.
there's
Outright
never an answer. In fact, there is a study out of Carnegie Mellon that shows that there has been no increase of harm to sex workers after the passage of FOSTA SESTA that was recently released in a journal, where they have the experts come in and do all the analysis, make sure the data is right. And so, so even that argument is hollow. And the fact that they moved overseas is very evident because you can see them, but that's why we didn't want Section 230 exported in our trade agreements, so that way other countries could pass similar legislation to FOSTA SESTA. And in fact, Canada basically says their legislation is okay, that they don't need anything. And Mexico gave themselves, I think, 5 years to, quote, pass legislation to try to comply with the overall Section 230. But what we're seeing overseas is the opposite, that more liability is falling on the internet service providers. You see what's going on in the European Union, in Australia, in the UK, and other places around the world, that the tide has shifted. And so to your question and my long-winded answer, Lynn, for a very long time, Silicon Valley was the golden goose that no one wanted to touch. There was legislation called SOPA-PIPA that blew up at one point because of the power of Silicon Valley to use their platforms. So Google, Reddit, Wikipedia, you go down the line, the internet was going to go dark. That was, I think it was at 2008 or 9, I can't remember what year it was. And members got paranoid and scared. We had won and I say we, because I represented Fox at the time and the content industry. We had won every vote in the House and Senate, but members got scared. And because of primaries, this was January 18th when it finally was pulled off the agenda from the Senate. And everyone thought that Silicon Valley couldn't lose. But along with the people on this call and others, saw that they could, and they were vulnerable. And the members that were on the side of passing SOPA-PIPA are still members of Congress, and they never forgot. They knew the misinformation, and they did not fall for it on FOSTA SESTA. And right now with the Earn It Act, again, there's always this hesitation, which is why it's going to take that collaborative effort of you and others and the people who are listening to us now to get together and put pressure on their local members of Congress, because that's the only way we're going to get it through. Because our friends on the other side in Silicon Valley and the trade associations and the Electronic Frontier Foundation and others that are out there fighting us, they're up on the hill every day.
And well paid, very well paid.
They're very well paid, and they're very good. I mean, they make good arguments.
Like us, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're well paid, but they're also make good arguments. I mean, I'm not going to succumb to the traditional argument, oh, well, their lobbyists are well paid or they have more money, because we crushed them in FOSTA SESTA. So, right. I always like to say, if it was all about money, your New York listeners would appreciate this. If politics was all about money, it would be President Bloomberg, because he spent $100 million in Florida and lost. I mean, it's not about money. It's about message, and it's about grassroots, and it's about making the right arguments and winning on the right arguments. We just have not had the grassroots necessary to overcome the noise that Jan was just talking about, inflation, all these other issues that are climate change, all these other issues that are sucking a lot of oxygen out of the Congress, legitimately so. But we have to get above that. If we don't get above that noise, we just become part of the wash. And everyone's trying. There's thousands of policy issues being debated every day up on Capitol Hill. And how do the ones raise to the top? Is people like us, and it's people who are listening to this program, who are reaching out, banging the pots and pans. And Lynn, you've heard me say this before. If you want to know how to succeed in Washington, read the book, Horton Hears a Who. And that's what we need to do. We have our Hortons, our members of Congress like Blumenthal and Blackburn and Wagner and others who are willing to carry us through Congress. But until Whoville makes enough noise, no one's going to hear us, because there's a lot of Wickersham brothers out there who are trying to stop us. And we just need to make sure that we make enough noise and to be heard. And we can do it. It's incumbent upon ourselves to do it, not blaming the power of Silicon Valley or others. They're hated up there. So, again, we have the advantage.
And Rick, I'm going to cascade off of this, because it's really easy for someone to say, well, I don't have kids yet, right? Maybe I'm a 20 something or early 30. I don't have kids yet. So how does this affect me? Or, you know what, that's my daughter's problem, not mine, if I'm a grandparent. Well, I'm going to tell you how it affects you. I'm going to read some very stark statistics. There was an article published in 2019 that highlighted research that had been done about adverse childhood experiences. And I can't think of a more heinous adverse childhood experience than online pornography, online abuse, and sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. Okay. And the outcomes resulting from a lack of treatment for children exposed to crime cost society more than $458 billion. So that's your insurance going up. That's your doctor's offices going up. That's the cost of your medication going up. That's the cost of your ER trip going up, because someone has to pay for that. And that someone is us.
It's your taxes.
Exactly. And the difference between disrupting and ending child exploitation and ending cancer, I don't know if there's a cure for that right now. They're getting better at their cancer research. All right. But it's a dream and a hope and a wish for us to cure that horrific disease. Child trafficking actually can be disrupted. It can be stopped. This is something we can actually end in our lifetime. So it's not hopeless. It's just a little challenging to talk about, right? And that's where it's so simple to get involved and make a difference. It's so simple. You find your congressional representative. I know Lynn's going to put the links on there for your congressional and your Senate representative. Mm-hmm. She'll give you 3 lines to say, hi, my name's Jan Edwards. I live in Orlando, Florida. Here's my zip code. I'm calling you to ask you to please support the Earn It Act, and here's why. Give your personal reason. I'm a mom of 5. I'm worried about their future. I'm a grandmother. I'm worried about my grandkids. I'm an aunt. I have siblings. I'm worried about their future and online. I'm asking you to please co-sponsor this bill. Thanks. Again, my name is Jan Edwards. I live in Orlando, Florida, and here's my zip code. Takes less than 60 seconds. And if there's enough of us to pick up the phone and make those phone calls, we literally can do it, because by staying silent, we become complicit. This is our country. We are the people of we the people. And it's on us literally to save our kids' lives. It's on us. And we're asking you to be with us, join with us. It's a great cause.
Well, and Jan, to that point, when we're on the calls with congressional staff of these senators and House members, the thing they ask us to do isn't go to their boss's fundraisers. They ask us to reach out to the people we are talking to have them contact their local members. Because what people don't understand about democracy and the Congress is that they do care about what their constituents think. That is part of the problem. That's why when someone from New York gets mad at a member from South Carolina, how can you be against this issue? Because they don't represent New York. They represent South Carolina. That's how. That's where their constituents are. They're not representing the people of New York. They're representing the constituents of their congressional district. Yes. And their district, and we have this in Florida, Florida members of Congress, I can tell you, protect the sugar industry against the sugar industry, because they don't like foreign sugar, because it hurts their people. Or oranges in Florida, right? I mean, it's again, you can't blame them. That's their products. That's their agriculture. New York and Vermont, it's milk. The famous Thank You for Smoking movie. It's the cheese of Vermont, right? It's Vermont cheddar. It's those things are important, and they listen to their constituents. And if they're not hearing from their constituents that this issue is important, then they're not going to react because they're hearing from other constituents who are saying that other issues are important. And even though they may be on our side, they are, limited in how many issues that they can fully engage in. And people don't understand how many issues there are out there. I mean, we always think our issue is the most important, and in this case it is. But others feel the same way. Jan, you mentioned cancer. The cancer lobby is huge. Mm-hmm. They get people to call in. They're testifying up in Congress. They're asking for money. They're doing, fly-ins. I mean, it's ongoing. Every industry, every issue, every quote special interest is on the Hill doing what they can to get their voices heard. And we just need to do the same.
Excellent. You both just brought up excellent points, Jan, because I also, there's so many other issues. I tell people it affects you. I don't care if you don't have children. I mean, I don't say that, but I'm just saying it hits us all in the pocketbook. And Absolutely. I use what you said, Rick, taxes, right? And also we have issues with national security and all of that going on. There's a lot to cover. Of course, for the warriors listening and watching, I'm going to have all kinds of links for you to follow and your take actions with Congress and how to connect with everybody. Jan, leave us with some final thoughts about kids and parents, whatever you want to talk about and leave us with.
Sure. So what I want y'all to know is your kids want this conversation. I stand in front of a room of 50 kids. They don't know me. I introduce myself, and within 30 minutes, they're pouring their little hearts out about what they're dealing with because one, I care and it's evident, right? And two, they just want to be heard. And this is such an important piece of their life. This thing right here, they live on it. They have access to the world. And the world has access to them and they don't know how to navigate it. And they're petrified to talk to their parents about it. And I'm telling you right now, they want this information. They're so hungry for it. When you've got a bunch of 13-year-old little middle school boys going, bye, Miss Jan. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All we did was talk. And it made a difference for them. That's what I want you to know. Our kids want this dialogue. They want this information. They, honest to God, don't know any better. And it really is an easy dialogue to have. You can just say, hey, you know what? I got this really weird DM on my Insta page the other day, and I wasn't quite sure how to deal with that. Has it ever happened to you? What did you do? And then you just be quiet and listen. And then that right there opens up a conversation that you have no idea to lead to, but right there, you've spoken in their language in an environment that they're familiar with. And they get to coach you. They get to educate you, which you in turn get to share wisdom with them. It's a symbiotic relationship that parents and children have. And this is an important time in their life. And they're waiting to hear from you. They're waiting. Every single time we do surveys and we ask them, who else should we educate? Who do you think's number one? Parents. Parents is the number one group that they know that we need to go talk to. So parents, I just invite you to get your brave on and take this conversation on, and pick up the phone and call your constituent, call your representative. They work for you. These are your children's lives that they're toying with, quite frankly. And you can be the one to make the difference. You don't have to be harsh. You don't have to be mean. You just have to come from a mom or a dad or an uncle or a grandma or an auntie point of view, even a big sister, big brother, right? Come from that point of view that you care about my fill in the blanks future. And this is going to impact it. And I'm asking you to stand with me as a parent.
And Lynn, if I can just add one thing to what Jan was saying, which I think is really important, because a lot of parents, when you talk about tech, they're like, oh, my kids know more about their devices or technology than I do. You know, how can I talk to them about it? And I always used to, when I would give lectures about how to be safe online during the MySpace days, I would ask the parents, like, do you know how a combustible engine works? And they'd like say no. Why? I said, well, you tell your kids don't drink and drive. That's a policy. It's a public policy. It's a personal policy. Don't drink and drive. I don't have to understand how the car works. I just know that you shouldn't drink and drive. So when you're talking to your kids, you're not talking to them about the technology and how it works. You're talking to them about how to protect themselves when they see that something is wrong. Don't go in a car with somebody who has been drinking. Doesn't matter if it's an electric car or combustible engine, it doesn't matter. Don't go into that car. And so the same thing is about technology, is that you're setting parameters, you're letting them know that some things are wrong. And if you come across it, you should come to us, to the parent and then talk, or a trusted adult to talk about concerns, because it's not about the technology. It's about common sense. It's about how to be safe. And that cuts across no matter what it's technology neutral, as we like to say in the tech world.
So you're both saying communication is the bottom line.
100.
Simple as that, is opening up communication. Rick, anything you want to leave us with the 3 bills?
No, I think, well, the COSA bill and the COPPA 2.0 bill are strictly Senate bills. And so Lynn will put the S on that. There are provisions of the COSA type language and the COPPA type language in the broader privacy bill that has been marked up, passed, I'm using Washington terms, that has passed the House Commerce Committee. So both of those bills moving forward would be great. So on the House side, there isn't a standalone counterpart to the COPPA 2.0 and the COSA bill, but important provisions of those 2 bills are in the House passed, the Commerce Committee passed legislation that we're hoping will get on the floor soon.
Okay, good. And all of you warriors listening out there, again, all of this information will be in the body of this video. Jan Edwards, President, Paving the Way Foundation. I couldn't have said it better. You are a dear colleague and a friend. And I know with you at the helm, with the kids and parents, we are going to do this. And Rick Lane, Iggy Ventures, with all of your tech expertise and your passion. And certainly I couldn't ever do my job without both of you. I lean heavily on all you do and bring it to the warriors. Rick, excellent, excellent work. I thank both of you for spending the time and for educating all of our warriors out there, because they do want help and they do want direction. And today, both of you have provided that. So I thank you very, very much.
Anytime, Lynn. Thank you for having us.
My pleasure, 100%.
You're welcome.